Somebody needs to mute themselves.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
I do have some handouts. This was an article I wrote for an AIW journal in 2013. And it's like a lot of things, it was a lark. Complete, and it still is. It hasn't gotten any better. But in a way, it was a testament to Melissa, who was very active in the club up there in North Carolina. And at the Campbell School, she would always show up and assist somebody, and just a generally nice person. So when she asked a bunch of wood turners if they wouldn't make her much room, of course I made one out of Norfolk Pine. And like a lot of things, it got more attention than it deserved. And as a matter of fact, I ended up, the next time I was a demonstrator for the AIW National, I brought a bunch in there, and by God, they all sold. these simple little things. So I mean, there's something about the pattern that caught somebody's attention.
Recording in progress.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Somebody
You're
has
good.
a question.
Lane.
Okay. All right. So with
A little
that
bit more on the wood. Looks like,
as a background,
I think that's.
I'm going to go through. Now, the thing that you're going to get out of this is, like a lot of things, this is not intended to be a finished product. This is intended to be a starting point on which you do other things. You can paint it, you can burn it, you can gouge it, you can do whatever you want to do. And it seems that right now a lot of people are really getting very creative with coloring, with dyes, with various, and of course paints, various forms of paints. And there's just no end to the things you can do with it. And there's no rules to follow either. You can do whatever you damn well please. So with that, I'll show you. Now, what you're going to get out of this, there's a couple of unique cuts that you're going to need to perfect in order to get a nice smooth thing here. And of course, you don't want to waste a lot of time sanding these things. And you also really want to make them thin enough so perhaps you could start piercing the tops. I've tried carving, and you can certainly do that. You can, well, I won't get into that. Your own imagination will work fine. Okay, so we're starting with a piece of Norfolk Pine, and I gotta tell you, the other reason for this, I guess I'm going to have to break down using a knife. Thanks to Mike and Steve, we have the largest selection of Norfolk pine that we've had in many years. And of course, our friend there found it. The house is right around the corner from his, and they were cutting down 6 Norfolk Island pine trees. And this is a pretty posh house. It's right on the bay, overlooking the Ringling Mansion. So it wasn't exactly poor folk. But why did he cut all these nice trees down? Well, somebody told him it was not a native plant. Oh, well, sure. It's not a native plant, native to Norfolk Island in the South Pacific. But it has been widely planted here because it's fast growing, and it withstands hurricane winds pretty well. Although the last one, I tested mine, and now there's a little bit of a lean to it because we had those strong winds that were coming out of the north, out of the north for a sustained period. Now, of course, it blew a lot of other things down. My shed roof is still gone, but generally speaking, in a hurricane, they will give. But the the leaves are not big, so there's not a lot of leaf area to catch the wind. So they've been good. Okay, so we picked this out. Now I had it wrapped up because the stuff, it doesn't take very long for it to dry out. Now this is just about right. You know, you can look at the amount of spalting that's occurred on there, and you should be able to get some interesting things. So that's important. So now we're going to put this on the lathe. We're going to go right on the pith using, this is the one-way big bite, and using that because you notice that you've got a big spread so that you've got a good drive. If you try to use other things, if you try to use one of these, you're more likely to drill a hole into the piece and it's just going to start slipping. So you need the width on that. So we mount that on the pith and we come across to the other end. And now this time I'm going to go more on center. Now you can say that we could certainly put it, okay, it's pretty close, a little more, there we go. Yeah, close enough. We could have it, turned it on center so that the pith is always uniform, but you'll see it's really not necessary. Okay, tool of choice, a Thompson roughing gouge with a handle that is full of double-up buckshot. And the mass is important here because it's rough, and until it gets smooth, you know, it's going to beat you up. So, let's see, what speed are we on here? Okay, it looks like that's about all we can get out of it. Okay, now, so I can get this right up against my leg, and I can start to trim away. Now, you heard things got a little exciting there as I went across the knots. And the closer we get to a round piece, the more we can speed it up. Now you notice that one of the things that's important here, so we want to make a cut that'll work on the side grain as well as a nice cut right across the end grain where the knots come out. So usually you try to make sure that you're not going straight in as you would like this, but rather at an angle so that the thing looks a little better. Okay, now we're starting to see if I can get a little more speed out. That's not much. So this is not a 2436. And that didn't slip. I usually, it's important here.
This is moving backwards. The thing wasn't driving in, it's moving backwards. Better.
Okay. By the way, I normally would take and stick a pin in here and actually burn in. If you stop this live center, if you make it dead and then lean on it, you're going to, there's no point in here. The point's gone. So you're going to make a cup. And that holds much better because I can't put too much force on before it will slip out. And if this slips, of course, the thing ends up in Brownlee's lap there. So, get a little better. I also want to try and see if I can't manage to get down into the wet stuff. So how long, Mike, how long ago did we pick this stuff up?
Maybe about 6 weeks.
6, 7 weeks.
Yeah, I guess about that. So, because we've had such hot weather and it's been so damp, the spalting came along very quickly. Gotta go just a little slower. And needless to say, the sharpening is important here. And of course the other thing that I keep harping on, if you look at the shavings coming off, if the shavings are right, you're doing the right thing. Okay, I think we're down to, yeah, I can see them mostly. No, I'm not going to bother from the whole thing. And you can see this bolting pattern. Now, look at the difference between this side and this side. And the difference is which side was laying towards the ground. Now, we had these things up on platforms, so none of them touched the ground, and yet it works differently. And of course, what's going on here is the sap is so rich in sugar that when we cut it, the honeybees come around. The honeybees are attracted to the sap, and of course, the sugar is very rapidly converted into something else which causes the discoloration, spalting. Interestingly enough, at the AAW convention in Louisville, we had a lady who had done a real PhD quality study on spalting, and it was interesting, but I'm afraid I lost interest. But there's all kinds of schemes for this. Some people claim you got to keep it out of the sun. Other people say that if you spread a can of beer on them, that provides, it helps the microorganisms that cause discoloration. I can think of a better use of the beer. Okay, we're getting closer now. But I'm disappointed that I can't quite get the speed out to get a very, very smooth cut. I think this is better. Okay, there we go. Ready for the knots? Slowly. So here again you can see that the mass of the tool helps to control that little bit of chatter. And as we look at it, it dug deep in here. So let me try and see if I can't do better. better. I'm getting nice shavings, but the diameter is actually shifting. Well, that's pretty good. Okay, now comes the next step here, where we're going to look at where the knots are. And I'll take a magic marker and I'll draw a line. And as I look around here at the knots, wow, nailed that one. That's still good. I wish that was up this way a little bit. And those are so small, they're okay. This one, I'd rather was down that way. I'm looking at how I'm going to move them. And by moving them, my intent is to alter the points so that I'm actually cocking the thing one way or another. However, as I look at this, well, I really can't improve too much. If I shift the whole thing this way, that will improve that position, but there's nothing over there to improve. And, you know, I really can't improve it. So if I can't improve it, I'll leave well enough alone and work it the way it is. Okay, I'm going to go back to the end now. I'm going to take, at this point, I would take my marker and say that I know that these knots are pointing this way, about 10 degrees, and I expect at the end, they all reach for the pith. So they start at here and they end up on the pith. But I'm not going to need more than about that much. So what I usually do is I'll look at this and I can get rid of that, and I look at this. I usually take this over to the bandsaw. But lacking a bandsaw, we're just going to have to spend a little more time with it. All right, I just need to get this a little better down here. So now we're running through, and if I was at home, I would of course grab a parting tool and go in here and cut this. Now it doesn't much matter how far in I go because I'm really creating a path for the bandsaw, so it makes it a little easier. I'll do the same here. What on earth is that noise? Hold on for a minute. I think it was jumping on the belt. My fault, I should have checked that.
Frank, could you state again how you know that the knots are going that way?
Well,
By looking at the knot.
yeah, by looking at it, you're right, Jim, I'm sorry, I should have pointed that out. Let's pick a knot here. Okay, here's a knot. Now, if you look at this knot, I
No
guess-
overhead.
I guess, well, it's good enough.
Put it in front.
Anyway, I can say that the pith, the middle of the knot is off center. And if of course the knot slopes away from that. So if the pith is off center, that means it's sloping in this direction. Now, when you first start, you can usually also find a little point right there, just above it. And now, of course, I turned all that away. But the amount that it goes does vary, and I keep trying to tell you that it's that perfect. Of course, it isn't, but it's good enough. Okay, I'm going to now take and no, I don't have. Geez, I wish I could cut this. Well, let me leave it here, and I can work on this end. I'll simply now take a bowl gouge and cut most of this off. So here, bear with me for a bit. And this is a one-way 5/8 bowl gouge, which has a very nice polished flute. We like that. It's a M4, which is steel, that we are happy with, improving over M2. And it is one of my favorites. So I'm now going to start taking off the material. Really wish I had bandsaw. Oh, now let me stop for a minute. The cut that I'm making, obviously I'm hogging off wood here, and I really want to see a lot of wood go away. But the flute is pointing away from me. Instead of a conventional way like this, I have rolled this over so that I'm using this edge of the flute. I'm not using the point. The only thing I'm using the point for is to ride against it. If I push against there, if that rides against, you see then I'm able to control that, and away the zero goes. So, with a 5/8 bowl gouge, I can easily take off a 1-inch cut if I want to. So we'll leave that there. Now, you can see now down to where I used the thing. Now, why did I pick that place? Well, I'm guessing. Experience tells me that based on the size of the knot, how far away from the center of the pith am I going to reach the point where it hits the center? And as I said, everything has to end up in the center. So now I'm then going to follow this a little farther. And you can see that I'm now actually, again, using the side of it. You never ever want to use the point, because if you do, you got such a small radius for your cut that invariably it's going to be choppy. You can do it, certainly, but it's a whole lot easier to use more of the length of the tool. So this is what we're doing here. And now, as I get closer, now you can hear the knots. Well, again, if you look at the shavings, if the shavings are good, you're doing good. Now as I stop, you can see here that I'm starting to hit these knots. And you can see that the angle that I have chosen, it needs to be more blunt. This is, got to go much farther that way. So I'm going to change this angle now to see if I can't stretch the knots out more. And I'm going to risk losing most of this knot, but I'm going to end up picking up these two, and they're the primary ones that are coming. So let's see where we go here. I want to warn you here that when you're dealing with Norfolk Pine, as you begin to approach the pith, you can see here all of a sudden, because it was off center, this whole thing is much weaker. You know, if I was doing a piece of hard maple here, I could take this diameter down to 1/8 of an inch and it would still hold. But I can't take this much more because it's going to cause us trouble. But now you can see with this knot, as I altered the angle, I'm now getting it longer. Now this one is getting pretty good. I'm going to take more off, but at this point I want to switch to a little finer tool. So I'm going from a 5/8 to a 1/2. The 1/2 inch is the same way. It's both a parabolic line. It was interesting. The Irishman, Glenn Lucas, had put on Facebook about a 5-minute video of him using, and it was focused right on this bowl gouge to show that he wasn't using the point, but he was off the point, and just had the shavings were coming off so uniformly. Now, admittedly, it's good. He's probably not as good as he thinks he is, but he's good. No, let's take and get a little more use out of this. Now I'm taking this down here, and I'm going to take this down to what would be a tenon. And what I'm using for a chuck is a Vic Mark small, and so in order to get a nice cut on there, I find that a bedan works as good as anything. I can come in here with this bedan and just make the nicest dovetail. See how nice that came out? And I can come around to the side and make sure that it is flat. And you all hear me harping on this tenon, as Mr. McKay got tired of listening to me. But it's so important that you hold it well. You know, if you're doing woodworking, carpentry as such, most guys spend a lot of time trying to come up with a workbench that's solid, so you can hold a piece of wood and do something with it. If it moves a little bit, then you've lost it. So this really works well. And I'm going to take a little bit off of this too. Not very much. Okay, that should be good. Now I'll go back and see if I can't refine this. And I should be able to increase the speed. And by the way, that noise you heard before was indeed that the motor wasn't locked down well. So, my fault, I should have checked that. But bouncing up and down the sidewalk certainly may have loosened that lock. Okay, so now I can come in here. So how's that looking? Oh, nice shavings. Okay, look, see, we got this one running all the way down in, and you can see that the pith was there, so this knot ends up right there, and sure enough, it's pointed at it. This guy is obviously a little lower, so in order to bring him in, I'd have to change the angle slightly, and both of these want a blunter angle, so I'm going to switch to that, and I haven't really gotten much of that. I could stand a little more of him. So I'm just trying to get as dramatic an appearance here as I can. So if you'll notice, I'm ever so slightly changing this angle with my wrist. So it's a push cut. The left hand doesn't do an awful lot. It's just long for the ride. But by as you can feel the cut, and if it's not quite right, just a little shift, and throughout it all, I'm also pushing against the nose. I'm putting pressure against the nose, but the cut is happening there. Minor point. Okay, so now we got a really dramatic one there, long one there. These two, okay, I need to go a little blunter with those, so I'll do that. And I think I can even improve on that. This is the 3/8 bowl gouge that Bill McKay was talking about. And the smaller diameter means that you can really control a finer cut. I'm not in any hurry. I'm just changing the angle. And I have now brought that out. So this is probably as good as I'm going to do here. Well, I can make these. Yeah, I can take a little off of that. Yeah, once more. Once more. Now, I'm making sure that I'm pointing, the flute is pointing right at you. Now you see how the shavings look different? And it's important here that we try and maintain that all the way down. Now I'm starting to lose it, and I have to change this tenon here. Okay. And you can see what I've done now is I have a tenon that's much too big, so I'm simply going to reduce it. Good. Okay. I don't dare bring that any farther in there. But I have now created a pattern that looks, it gives you that nice dramatic effect of the different knots, and on top of that, the variations in the spalting. So now you can see that the grain lines are pretty nicely close together, and in between the knots, instead of being great, they tend to wave a little bit. So there's a lot of things to look at that people enjoy seeing. Okay, I don't have a saw with me, so we'll get rid of it the old-fashioned way. No, I should be able to over here. I guess I can use this. So the reason I used the big bite was to enable me to shift the points, the centers, to give me a different look. It turns out I didn't need it. But I just foxed myself. This is not. This doesn't have the jaws that I want. The difference between the dovetail jaws and the rib jaws are such that you don't mix them, don't confuse them. So I can't overstress the importance of making that tenon exactly fit. Now one of the demonstrators we had at one time was Jack Roberts, who was just a master at doing lidded boxes. He can make a box in 5 minutes, I swear. But when he talks about the tenon, he tightens it up, and then he looks at the pattern that it left, because the tenon collapses some fibers. And you can see exactly how close it comes. So he's very, very fussy about that. And I just screwed up.
It's too tall.
I have to cut it a little different. I was busy paying attention to the pattern. This is one of the things I dislike about these Bic-Mark blades, and that is that the tenon pops loose. You can see what's happened here is that the insert is that's not coming loose. Huh. Now what? You don't have a vice grip or something? What do you do?
No. Oh, the body is disconnected. Let me see that again.
Put the wrench in the jaws. Okay. Good.
Got a lot of crud in the threads. put the big white duck on it.
So this end is easy, but I broke off this part, didn't I? That wasn't it. Ah, close enough. Now all I have to do, I'm just going to read through that. And I flattened this. I made a new tenon, and I'm going to cut some more off. Now, it turns out that you can have a nubbin there, and so long as the nubbin is less than, I think it's 6/10, it should be able to fit. Actually, it ends up being about the diameter of the nose on that. I just finished a series of chair spindles for a restoration. It turned out that the end of the spindles, they wanted them to be 9/16, and 9/16 ends up being just about what you got on the end there. So it was a good thing to measure with. Okay. Now, the finish of this is important. How am I doing on time, Rich? Anybody watching?
28.
7:39,
20 minutes.
Oh, there's a clock.
7:40.
So we of course are now out of round because of that screwing around with the tenon. So let me bring it back in. So this of course is all waste here. You know, cut that off later. We'll end up coming in and doing a little bit more work. Should be able to break it.
That usually the bands. Out of the 10.
Almost. But not quite. I'm going to read through this and part it off. Okay. Sorry for the delay. I should have done a smaller piece. So now what we're getting into is how we shape this. And I can use several ways, but most of it is going to be with a 1/2-inch pull guide. And you know, the last time I was here, you saw me bring in a grinder, and I figure I can get away without it by having more sharp tools. So what I need for a base now, this is my top, this is my base. I don't need much more about this side. So I'm starting to grade this. And to give you some idea of where I'm going with this, I want this whole base here to be a nice thing. So I'm going to come across here with the with the hair again with the side of the gouge. And if you look at this, you're going to say that this cut is not bevel riding. But you'd be wrong, because instead of riding the bevel on the nose, I'm riding the bevel on the side. And that gives me the ability to make a much finer cut. And when I get to the size I want, I don't have to spend a lot of time sanding. So I keep going to get where I want, and I'm going to take it down to the side. So where I go with this now, this is a cut to remember. I can try and go off the nose, and if I do that, you notice that the shavings I'm making are close to powder, because I'm beating right up against the end grain all the way down. And it wasn't a bad cut, but it wasn't much to my liking. And switch to this tool rest is by Steve Sinner, and
It's for your 2436.
so we're not going to use that. Yeah, I can use this. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get this down to some nice shape. It's close, and then I can swing this around. And actually now go underneath. So this is, you see, I'm using the radius. I've got the tool locked into the rest, and I can just swing it across. Now, I think I'm not going to take this a whole lot further, but I want you to see that I try to have a rim. And then you say, well, how do I cut underneath the rim? Well, at some point, you reach for this thing here. This has a very tiny cutter, and I can come in underneath it and cut. I think I could have done a lot of this through a bowl gouge, but this enables you to do more. So this is the sort of thing that would have been ideal for a hook tool. Okay. You get the idea, because I don't want to, I want to not talking about what you do with this thing. We have created a piece that I would like to make thinner, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it now, because I would rather you see what you can do with it. Where's mine? There it is. So let me put this aside, and I want you to look at some of the things that we've played with. Okay, first off, so this is a plain and simple one. That shows the pattern that you get off of a Norfolk Island pine piece. And on the underside, I would usually put gesso or something. I tried black milk paint on there, and that didn't work. But there's other things you can try. Here's one, and this is vegetable dye. So you can get some really vibrant colors in here, and you can alter them. It doesn't stay that way, or you can mix the dye a little weaker and get more of a pastel look to it. So there's things like that you can do. Here, I tried using milk paint, and my intent was to take and cut a series of pieces with a veining tool and just cut things, trying to make it look like, how do I make it look like dirt? This thing was growing in dirt. Gee, wouldn't that be something? Anyway, you can see things you can do. And now, don't get the idea that things work. This was a disaster. And what this is, this is that stone-looking paint in a rattle can. Something interesting. But here I was trying to use, and all those little circles, what it is there, if you take a W point drill bit and you win, I neglected here to do, I should have done it on a drill press. On a drill press, you can get, and of course you've got the dye, or you've got paint or something, and you're going to cut through that to show the wood underneath. So I've got a ways to go with that, but there's some of the goofy things you can do. There's no rules, nothing wrong with how you do it, and you're going to come up with something interesting. And boy, I can't wait to see what Eric comes up with. You can see the wheels turning over there. So there's, I want to mention this. I did one, and I stopped, and lo and behold, the thing is cracking. I told you that we had waited too long. The moisture wasn't quite right. But if you take and you put it in the waterproof bag, the cracks close up. So you can see that they're pretty much gone. And I can now finish drying it and make something out of it. But you can, obviously, the closer you get to the perfect pattern, it is. Now you notice on this one here, those knots were cut the wrong way. So I end up with a fairy ring of round discs instead of a long thing. It's both interesting, and it's things that you can work with. One, I couldn't stand it. This is now a candlestick. So, who's to say you can't do that? I bet I can sell a candlestick. Now, finding a candle to match the colors, that's going to be interesting. But anyway, guys, this is what I had to present. And I have an ulterior motive here. And since we have such a good selection of Norfolk Island Pine, maybe I can convince you guys to use it up before it goes bad. Because the clock is ticking. You know, this stuff does not, once you get the spalting pattern to show nice black color, then you better make sure that you're finishing it up. Okay, any other questions here?
So after you've turned it like that one,
What?
how are you going to dry it so it doesn't crack?
Oh, I put it in a paper bag.
Okay.
So this one here, I will, well, I have a whole lot more turning to do on this. And I will, I stopped here because the tendon is corrupted. So I couldn't, I have to re-true that. And what I normally do is I hollow the bottom so that I don't get cracking. And if you look at the pieces, pick one up and you notice that I have cut a groove underneath there. So I can come in and expand into that groove. And now be careful, because you're not able to put a whole lot of force on this. You can split it, and I'd rather split than look at you. But if you hold it with the tailstock, you can do an awful lot of turning, especially with smaller, delicate tools.
I have a question. Maybe I misheard at the beginning. What are those?
Whatever you want.
Oh, okay.
You mean,
Whatever you want.
you can.
Mushrooms?
I thought mushroom, yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see if they still sell at the gallery as well as they have in the past. You know, when you get good Norfolk pine, there's so many things you can do, so many hollow forms, so many other things that you tend to go in that direction. But sometimes the simpler thing, where you can obviously turn out one of these in an hour's time, let it dry and spend another hour playing with it. And if you can get $50 for it, that's about as good as income as I ever managed to get. So there we go. Okay?
Thank you, Frank.
Could you show us the profile of that last tool you used?
What's that?
The last tool you
Could-
used.
The profile.
Is that a little carbide cutter? Is that the one you're talking about?
Oh, yeah. What that is
The blue handle.
here it is. And let's look at that closer. Can you zoom in on that one? It's a cup cutter, and this was part of the set that
Turn it this way a little bit. Angle it this way.
Simon Hope put this out as a set. One was curved and one was straight.
It's a great.
And the idea is when you're going to use this for making Christmas tree ornaments or small hollow forms or bird houses, all that different things. It's very useful. Many people make it. And it's one of the few carbide tools that I ever use. But it has a purpose, and it works
Ingrain.
in grain. There you go. If you're into hook tools will be fine. And somewheres I have that Raleigh Monroe thing. I'm sure that would work fine, but it's never worked for me. I should clean it up and sell it.
Thanks.
Anything else? Good.
Okay.
All right. Don't forget to get your bowls